So I am Alyssa. I will be moderating our panel. I'm a recruiter sitting in Philadelphia. And I would just like to thank everyone for being here. While you're on the call, just make sure you are on mute. If you have questions, please put them right into our chat on the right-hand side of the screen. Any questions that aren't answered today, feel free to email myself or email your recruiter, and we'll make sure those questions get answered. We are going to use the questions that were asked prior to the event for the most part during today's panel. There were a lot of really awesome questions, so thank you so much for submitting those. I'm really impressed with the quality of the questions and just how much thought you put into them. And don't forget, our next application deadline is April 19th. I know some of you have interviewed, some of you are confirmed core members for next year, but if you have not started or submitted your application, our next deadline is coming up on April 19th. So with that, we are going to get started. I'm going to have each of our panelists and staff members on. Just introduce yourself with your name, your hometown, where you're serving, the city, and grade level, your career goals, and what you do in your free time. Just a quick overview, answer those. If you miss one, that's okay. So I will pass it on over. We'll have Allison go first with this one.
Hi, I'm Allison Kenny, and I am serving in Boston. I'm originally from Peoria, Illinois, and moved here from Wisconsin after I graduated from school. And I am serving in a third grade classroom currently. I am planning on going back to law school after probably not this fall, but next fall. I've taken the LSAT. I'm getting ready to take it again. But yeah, I want to be a lawyer. And in my free time, I spend a lot of time with my roommates who are also City Year Americorps members, which is nice.
Jacob.
Hi, my name is Jake Moscato. I'm originally from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but I serve in Philadelphia. I'm currently serving at an elementary school. I work with fourth grade, and I would like to eventually return back to school, grad school, and get my doctorate, but that's in the future. I'm actually serving another year with City Year next year, so I'm really looking forward to that. In my free time, I like to spend time with family and friends.
Thank you, Jake. Jay?
Oh, there we go. Unmuted. Jay, I am from Charlotte, North Carolina, also California, from all over. I serve in Washington, D.C. in a third grade classroom. This fall, I'm going to George Washington University with a major in foreign policy, double major in foreign policy and political science. And in my free time, I mostly just wander around DC because it's such a pretty place.
Thank you. And Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I am from Providence, Rhode Island, which is where I serve. I am in a third grade inclusion classroom. My career goals is to be a special ed teacher in a third grade classroom. And what I do in my free time is I like to hang out with my dogs.
Thank you, Ashley. Nathaniel?
Yes.
Oh,
okay.
There we go. Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Nathaniel, born and raised in Washington Heights, New York, aka Little DR. I served in the South Bronx in a 5th and 8th grade math classroom. Career goals are to tour the world as an artist and musician. So in my free time, I listen to a lot of music and beats and do writing.
Thank you, Nathaniel. And Mike?
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Hogan. I'm originally from Marcellus, New York. I served in Boston last year, and I'm currently serving at a K-8 school here in Buffalo, New York. I work with 7th and 8th grade ELA students, and my career goal is to teach 7th and 8th grade ELA, so I'm living the dream.
Thank you, Mike. And Lisette.
Hi, yeah, my name's Lisette. I'm originally from California, and I serve here in the New Hampshire site. And I'm a service leader, returning service leader. And one of my career goals is to become a social worker, especially in schools. And what I want to do next year is that I'm thinking about becoming an impact manager, or working with any organization that does like a lot of after school programming. That's it.
And Dawn.
Hi everyone, my name is Dawn Listoka. I am a recruitment director with City Year. I work remotely out of the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. I've been at City Year for 13 years. I have been in my role for 6 months, and I oversee recruiters in the Northeast portion of our country. My long-term career goals are unknown, as I am currently enjoying my new role, 6 months.
Thank you. And Dawn will be helping on some of the background pieces, kind of helping with the chat and answering questions you have there. So if you have logistic questions about an application or something of that nature, just put that right into the chat and we will do that. Definitely share what you enjoy doing. We want to hear about you too. We just don't have enough time for everyone to share. So we're going to go into a number of different sections today. We are going to go over the City Year, an overview of City Year, the City Year application, how everyone chose their city, your pre-service, relocation, training, day-to-day service, living on a stipend, post-service plans, and then we will wrap up. And a little touch on each of our cities, and then we will wrap up. So we have a lot to do in the next hour and a half. So let's jump right in. So can I have one of our wonderful core members just give us a little overview of what City Year is? If anyone stumbled upon this link and is here and doesn't know, we're just going to give a little overview of what City Year is.
I can answer.
I can
oh no, at the same time.
You can go, Jake, you go first, and then Mike, I'm going to pass it over to you for the second part of that question.
Okay. So City Year is an educational nonprofit whose overall goal is to decrease the amount of students who are pushed out of high school, and so we want to increase the amount of students that graduate. And by doing that, we serve with students from 3rd grade all the way up to 10th grade in literacy, math, social and emotional learning, and attendance. And so that's the way that we keep students on task and make sure that they're able to graduate.
Thank you, Jake. And Mike, do you want to just give us just tell us the mission, what the mission of City Year is?
Yeah, sure. City Year's mission is to, I think, empower young people most fundamentally. We are trying to build a sustainable future insofar as we work with youth that have often come from marginalized communities, and we are going into school to build change agents for the future. We are dedicated to empowering young people to realize their full potential. It's a really wonderful mission, I think, and it's nice to be a part of that every day.
And we're going to get into the day-to-day of everyone's experience, so you'll get to know a little bit more about what a day in the life of a core member looks like. But before we get to that, does someone want to tell me, Lisa, why don't you tell me what made you want to serve with City Year? And this is a question that came from Jonathan.
So initially, in college, I was an engineer. I was studying engineering, and then I didn't like it. So then I went into psychology because that's something that had always interested me. And then I didn't know in what capacity or exactly what I wanted to do in psychology. So then I realized, like, with taking a lot of classes that I was taking, a lot of the classes were like child development or child psychology, and I realized like something I can see myself doing. So then I was still very uncertain about what exactly I wanted to do though. So I was like, I should not go to grad school because grad school, as we all know, is very expensive, and to not know what you're going to do and to apply to a program you're not too certain about, I think that's not a wise choice. So I decided to kind of put that off. And a friend who I had gone to college with, but was a year older than me, was doing City Year New Hampshire, was doing City Year New Hampshire, and she like encouraged me to just even think about it, because I wanted to get that exposure with working with children directly. And so I applied to City Year, and I applied to other sites, and then she said, like, my friend and I had another conversation where she said, like, New Hampshire has, like, needs a lot of Spanish speaking corps members. And so, like, I was like, okay, like, I should put that as an option because, like, I should go where I feel like a community will, where I will benefit the most, and then a community will benefit the most from a corps member. So that's the reason I am at City Year. And I think I'm glad that I've served here because it is a very unique site. And yeah, and so I wanted to work with kids, and I wanted to work in a community where there would be a lot of like bilingual and multilingual families and children. And I think like that's what really drew me to City Year.
So how about one other corps member? What made you want to serve with City Year?
For me, I had done some tutoring work while I was down at Morehouse in Atlanta, and I was actually doing canvassing and bumped into a recruiter outside from the old city office, and he was just very direct and said we need more young black men in the classroom, and it struck a nerve for me just because of my involvement in education growing up in New York City, and also seeing like what education was down um, was like in Atlanta. So education just became a very soft spot in my heart, and I had an opportunity to be in a role where I could be a near to peer, have a near to peer relationship, and I feel like that's who I am as a person. That's where I thrive in terms of being a teacher in that medium. So I definitely took the chance to capitalize on that opportunity, and served 2 years. Great time.
So for any of our corps members, if you could think of one piece of advice you would give to yourself when you were filling out that application or going through the application process, what would it be? And this is a question we got from Shona. Allison, you want to share? We haven't heard from you in a little bit.
Yeah. I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give myself like a year ago or like a year and a half ago is not to put it off. And like just sit down and get it done because it's really not that bad. Like it didn't take me that long, and it really wasn't that hard for me to fill it out. And not to like stress over it a ton because that probably had a lot to do with me putting it off, but I definitely like worked myself up over it, but just not to put it off and just like sit down and get it done because it's a huge weight off of your shoulders once it's done and submitted.
That's good advice. And Jay, we have a question from Isabella. What concerns did you have when you applied, and have they changed while serving?
I forgot to unmute myself. Can you hear me now? Okay. I was unsure whether or not my life experiences or like what I could bring to the table would be helpful like towards like for the children. And so like that was some of the doubts I had. But like since being here really is like we all, like, especially my team, we all come from very different backgrounds, and we each have like our own little niches that are really helpful to these kids. You never know what's going to connect with the child. You never know what can make a difference for them, and help them like value their education or figure out behavior issues, whatever it may be. So I think just like trusting yourself and knowing that you do have something to contribute.
Thank you. So the next section is choosing a city. So it's also part of the application process. So we have some folks who stay close to home, and we have some folks who moved. Ashley, do you want to tell us a little bit about why you decided to stay close to home? And then we'll have someone who relocated share with us a little bit about your relocation and what made you decide to relocate.
Yeah, so I'm from Providence. I decided to stay serving in Providence, more because I went to Gilbert Stewart Middle School where we had City Year, and it was just very beneficial for me. And my City Year who I had, she was very supportive, and I just wanted to be that kind of person for someone else. And I also didn't want to leave home. I've never like moved out, and I joined City Year right after high school, so I kind of didn't know like what to do after. So I decided to stay home and serve.
That's definitely a great reason. So how about Jay or Mike? How about Mike? Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, because you've done both.
Yeah, so I'm from upstate New York. I went to college in Rochester. So the move to Boston was definitely very different for me. It was about 8 hours for me from where I was. I moved partially because I wanted to be where City Year was founded and still headquartered. I thought that would be a really unique experience, and it certainly was. I wanted to try living in a community that I had never been a part of before. And beyond that, I like the sports and everything in Boston, so that was another kind of fun aspect. There's a lot to do in a place like that. And then pretty late in the game this summer, I made the move to Buffalo, which is only about 2 hours from where I grew up. That move was really prompted by the opportunity to serve at a startup site. This is our first year. And the Buffalo community means a lot to me. I spent a lot of time here as a kid, and it always felt like it was, I guess, easier to convince someone to maybe serve in Boston or New York. But the kids in Buffalo sometimes I always felt like, don't get the attention from nonprofits and young people. So it was important for me to make this move because of that. And it's been a really, really wonderful place to serve. The community's been really welcoming to us. The schools are excited to have us here, and the kids are really great.
So a few people asked, what made you decide on the city that you're in? So someone we haven't heard from, maybe Jay, Jacob, Allison, what made you, or Lisette, you have a good story too. What made you decide, what was that final factor in deciding a city, a site?
I can go. I shared a little bit about like why I decided to serve here. And like my friend had said, like we need a lot of Spanish speakers here. Manchester, which is specifically where we serve in New Hampshire, there are a lot of like refugees and like immigrants that come from like the Dominican Republic, a lot from like the Caribbean and like from Central America. And given that New Hampshire is like 94% like white, there is not a lot of like ethnic diversity. So she gave me all of this information, and I realized like that is something that I feel like I can't imagine not growing up and seeing myself or an educator that looked like me. So that's what really drew me to come here. And like all the students that I like serve are students of color. And like my first day, they were like, Miss Garcia, you speak Spanish. We've never had a city year that speaks Spanish. And that like meant a lot to me. And I realized like it meant a lot to them. And I work with a lot of like English language learners and along with my partner teacher. And my partner teacher said like, if I wouldn't have had you, like I don't know what I would do because I don't know Spanish and I don't even know where to start, right? And so I'm glad that I was able to bridge that like gap between my students and my teacher. And I think that drew me to develop really good relationships with the students that I served. And it was just really nice to hear that like just physically me, like I was making an impact. And I'm glad that they know that they can someday be an educator, even though they've never seen themselves represented. So yeah, that's like the big reason why I decided to come here.
Great. So I think you heard a few answers. And if you're deciding between sites, it's always good to reach out to a recruiter, someone who can share with you a little bit more about the sites you're thinking about. But really, there's no bad reason when you're deciding a city. Sometimes it's what's kind of pulling you there. So we're going to move to the next section, which is pre-service. So once you were already accepted to City Year, kind of thinking about what those next steps were. So Allie asked, what was your biggest fear before starting service, and what were you most looking forward to? So let's hear from Nathaniel and Jay on this one.
I can
You can go first.
Okay. For me, I think my case was slightly different because I didn't know I was serving until about a week before. So I got accepted I got accepted about 2 weeks before, and then I had to like figure out whether I'd do it. I had that week after to figure out whether I do it, and then I had to find housing and a roommate within a week. So I moved from North Carolina to DC. So it was like a big thing trying to figure out housing and all that. But I think the one thing that was so helpful was just like the Facebook group chat, because there was also a lot of City Year who got accepted like super late. So I ended up having another City Year roommate, and it's really great to be able to get on there early on and just connect with people and figuring out that, because in DC especially, because it's so expensive here, most City Year do live with each other. And so you might have like 4 City Year in one apartment because it's like $2,000 for like a studio here. And so that was really helpful. So it was a big fear, but like once I talked to other City Year and worked it out, it was really cool, and I love being here.
What was the first part of the question again, Alyssa?
What was your biggest fear before starting service, and what were you looking forward to the most?
Biggest fear. My biggest fear was having to commute super really far because I'm not always a morning person. But that was, quickly solved. I ended up serving in the Bronx, which wasn't too far from where I'm born and raised in Washington Heights. So that all worked out very, very well. I was just most looking forward to being in a role where I was able to be a mentor. And just 'cause I feel that I have a strong ability to just understand kids in a way, just in a way where I just listen first, and trying to understand what they're saying without like trying to push my beliefs on them. And I think sometimes that's why they gravitate towards me. So I feel like within me having that capability, I feel like I can take on a role where I can be someone who is a figure in their life that they can look to as someone that they trust and look up to. And I was excited to just take on the responsibility of that role in the community.
So Nathaniel, you mentioned early start time. So does everyone want to just quickly go around and tell us what time you start your day and what time you start your commute?
When I was serving, I would start. I mean, we have first circle at 7:30. Um, but I was probably up at like 6:30 the latest, maybe a little bit earlier. Uh, Probably like 7 o'clock because I used to ride my bike after I got my bike, so I had a little more extra time. Made things a little bit easier, but around that time was when I would start.
Anyone else want to share?
We first circle at 8 o'clock every morning. I if I want to get here like exactly 8 o'clock or like 7:50, I'd probably leave my house around 7. But a lot of studios, I guess in DC, the average commute would be about an hour because most people live out in like a little bit farther where it's like cheaper, but about an hour. So like waking up at like maybe 5 or 6. Yeah, 5:30.
Anyone else want to share?
I wake up at. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I wake up at like 5:30, and first circle is at like 7:45. Takes me like an hour to get to service, and you just always want to like prepare for extra time in case like the buses or the trains are running late or there's delays because that happens sometimes, and so you kind of have to like be early, like on time is late. So in City Year.
Allison, why don't you tell us yours? And also just if you want to just tell us what is First Circle for those folks who don't know what that means.
Yeah, so my team first circles at 7:30. And so I'm usually like out of the house like around, I try like no later than like 6:50 because I hate traffic, so I like try to get on the earlier one instead of being on a cramped bus. I just don't want to deal with it, so I try to leave earlier. But first circle is kind of like just a pulse check first thing in the morning, like when your whole team gets there. It's where like your impact manager or your TL kind of goes through like any announcements that you have during the day. You usually talk about like anything that's like going on that like the whole team needs to know about. It's really just like a good way to check in with each other in the morning. And also like we always do a readiness check just to make sure that everyone has like all like parts of their uniform on and like everyone like looks how they're supposed to. But yeah, it's really just like a good way to check in with your team first thing in the morning and get the day started.
So our next question is, did you do anything to prepare yourself for working with kids before starting? And that came from Kelsey. Ashley, why don't you give us, since we haven't heard from you in a few.
Yeah, so I went to the Met High School, and at the Met, I have an internship. So throughout my 4 years of being in high school, I got to intern in a classroom, a special ed classroom, from 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. So I kind of already knew like how it would be with working with students around that age. So I didn't really have to like prepare anything. I think I just had to prepare like working in a group. So like working with my math group and starting to like plan lesson plans and my English, my ELA group, and just like trying to find new ways to like introduce new things to them in a fun way, so they can like have fun with it.
Anyone else want to share something that you did to prepare yourself before starting service? If you did anything.
I was someone that had never worked with kids before starting City Year. Like I had never worked in a school. I majored in political science in college, so like I had no like education background, or I didn't even really like babysit all that often. Like in high school was like a part-time job, so I had never really worked with kids. So I think the biggest thing for me was just like going in like with a completely open mind and like not being afraid to like ask the people on my team and my friends that were education majors or are going into teaching, like even if I thought it was the dumbest question, like not being afraid to ask them. And then also like leaning on your team for support. And my partner teacher has been a huge help. She's amazing. So just asking her for feedback or like any questions that I have has definitely been like, I didn't so much prepare. It's just like knowing that there was going to be a lot that I didn't know.
And so that brings us to our next question that we got from Kelsey. And if I'm mispronouncing anyone who asked questions, I apologize, names. But what experience did you have prior to your City Year service? And which of these experiences helped you succeed with this work? And so Allison shared with us that she didn't have experience with teaching and working with kids. But can anyone tell me some experiences that you had previous to serving and what has helped you succeed?
I can say a little bit. I did my undergrad in Rochester, New York, which is a similar community to Buffalo. And throughout that time, I worked with students in the Rochester City School District. I ended up probably putting in about 15 hours a week by my senior year. And I think that made a big difference. Just, being a white male from the suburbs, it was a lot different for me working in urban schools. So I think that kind of culture shock happened prior to me coming to City Year, which definitely helped. I definitely worked with a lot of people that have never been in urban schools before, and City Year is really great in that whatever level of experience you have, there's a lot of support and training and opportunities to continue growing. So.
Did anyone have experiences unrelated to students before coming to City Year? So working in teams or leadership experiences that you think has helped you with your work with City Year?
I can answer that. I graduated from Westchester University last May, and during my time at Westchester, I worked for the LGBTQA services office. And so I worked on a team of peer educators, and our job was basically to create programming and also facilitate programming for the campus community that was educating people about LGBTQIA issues. And so I had experience working on a team, and I knew what it was like to be overseen by an advisor, but it wasn't quite as organized as City Year. So I think like stepping into the City Year role, I learned a lot more about what it should look like to work on a team. And there's just so much structure. And so even though I appreciate the experience that I had working at Westchester, I think that City Year has given me even more experience with just like the structure that they have with like TL, like your managers and the people. There's so many like, tiers of leadership, which has been really helpful.
Great. So now we're going to move into, I think one of the things that worries people a lot is that relocation housing piece. So can someone like to share how did you find your roommates and furnish your apartment, which was a question we got from Grayson. How did you find your roommates, a place to live, and furnish your place? Allison, you had a big move. You want to share?
Sure. Yeah. I found my roommates through, like someone else said, the Facebook group. I was living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the time, and coincidentally, another girl was moving to Boston who was living in Milwaukee and going to a different college across the city. So I met with her once before we ever decided to live together, and then I didn't see her again until like a week before work started. And we accumulated 3 more roommates. So I live with 4 other girls who do City Year, and it has worked out phenomenally. We all get along very well. But we found housing. We found each other through the Facebook group, and then we found housing by like all of us just sitting down like a couple nights of the week, like just looking on like Zillow, like just random housing websites. And City Year also does a really good job of telling you what neighborhoods, at least in Boston, most of the schools are predominantly in, so that way you can have an idea of where like your commute is going to be lesser. So we picked Dorchester, and 4 out of the 5 of us all work in schools in Dorchester and have a commute that's under an hour. So that worked out beautifully. And then for furniture wise, we brought like as little as possible. I think the only thing we overloaded on was kitchen stuff, because when you have 5 people who have never met each other, you kind of bring everything you have. And we all, I guess, had a lot of kitchen stuff, but we, like the bigger stuff, like the couch, those types of things we all talked about before. And then a few random things we got from people who were moving out of the apartment above us. And they're like, hey, do you guys want this? And then we kept them in our house. But really, furniture-wise, all I bought was brought with me was a bed and a dresser. And then I ended up buying some stuff when I moved here, since I was it was like an 18-hour drive. So I did not want to ship all that with me. But yeah, just talk to your roommates.
Would someone else like to share their story, whether you had a big move or a small move? Lisette, you want to share a little bit about how they moved in?
Yeah, so I moved from California, so like that's a huge move. That's like from the other side of the country. And the recruitment manager that here at the site, he did a really good job of like having like the Facebook group and having us connect with each other. And like people would put on there like, oh, like I already found an apartment. I just need like 3 or 4 roommates. So like that was really helpful. And that's how like I found like the house that I lived with and like the girls that I lived with. So I think it's just like I'd like to consider myself a very reserved person, but like really putting yourself out there. And as far as, because it's like housing, so like you need this, and just like saying yes to it. Yeah, so it wasn't that hard because the recruitment manager did a very good job of like providing all these websites and all these like apartments and homes that were up for rent that like other city years had lived before in. So that was good. And as far as furniture, like the place that I lived in, a lot of cityers had always lived there. So like the people that lived before us, they had just bought like new couches and like new things. So like it was kind of just handed down. And I think that's what like happens a lot here in New Hampshire. Like a lot of people relocate to New Hampshire, so and they buy a whole bunch of things, and then it's like they don't want to take that back with them, so then they end up leaving it. They end up leaving it there for like whoever is to come. So yeah.
Great. So we had a question from Amy who asked, how did you decide what area you wanted to live in? So Jake, you want to answer this one?
Sure. So I went to Westchester University, which is really close to Philadelphia. And I actually moved to Philadelphia with my roommate from college at the time because he was also relocating. He started going to grad school at a university in the city. And so together we were just kind of looking for different places honestly that were more affordable. So wherever where we could afford to live, and that was close to like public transportation, because I knew that with City Year, I could very easily get placed somewhere that I'd have to take a bus or a train. And so we wanted to be close to like the subway and all those things. And so those are kind of the things that factored into ultimately how we decided to live where we are. And I really like this area because there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. It's not that far from my school. The commute's pretty quick, especially because I get to like listen to music on the train, so I don't really mind commute at all.
And do you just want to touch on how you commute? What's that? How you take a...
Yeah, so in the mornings, I walk to the subway station, which is a few blocks away, and I hop on there, and I'm on the train for like probably 45 minutes, and then I get off the train, and right outside there's the train station that I get off at is a bus stop, which takes me like a block away from my school. And so it's really just like a long train ride and then like a 10-minute bus ride to school. And it's kind of cool because I run into some of my teammates on the commute there, depending on like what our morning schedule is. So if we see each other on the bus, we can like sit together and so a lot of us were able to travel to and from school. So if you're worried about that, like you'll always usually have a buddy. And it's a pretty easy.
So we do in a lot of our cities provide transportation passes for our AmeriCorps members. So you don't have to pay for your transportation. And then we also recommend living close to a bus or train station if that's possible in those cities. Does anyone else want to just share a little bit about their commute? If it's similar or different from Jake's?
Mine's pretty much the same. I mean, similar, I guess, because DC is a very metro-heavy city. So I'm very lucky that I live in an apartment that basically has its own bus stop. It's like a huge apartment, has like 1,200 people in it. So our stop, and then it's like a bus that comes every 5 minutes, and I can take the bus to the metro, and then from there I can either the metro is like maybe like 10-minute walk from school, so that from there I can either walk or take another bus. But like she said, there's like DC gives us like $200 on our Metro card every month to use, and so because it's a lot, like I've never ran out of money. So that allows me like a lot of like freedom, I guess, to figure out which way I want to get there. So I can either take the Metro all the way, or I can take a bus, which might be cheaper, or I can do a mixture of both. So sometimes I take 2 buses and a train in the morning, which sounds like a lot, but it's like really not. Just figuring out like getting like the right apps to figure out what's the quickest way to get you somewhere. And like my commute is maybe like 30 minutes, and it's not bad. So, but that Metro card, that's a big bonus for sure with the benefits.
And we had a question in the chat. Lisette, do you want to share how you commute in New Hampshire?
Yeah. So the good thing about Manchester is that you basically live where you will serve. I live a couple blocks from the school that I serve at, and but before that, like I do have to go to First Circle at 7:30. So like we all the cityers meet at like a certain location, and then from there like you break out into your teams, and then you all like some of them said like you all commute together to the school. So like I think from the central point to like all the schools you're like no further than like 2 miles. So like it's not bad at all, and like so a lot of people carpool and drive because like unfortunately public transportation here is not very reliable, but I think that's why they have it set up that way, that we all like live and we meet close to where we serve.
Great, thank you. So if someone wants to share, how did you adjust to being in a new city? Mike, you want to grab this one?
Yeah, definitely. I obviously moved to Boston right after my undergrad. I was really lucky. I had a really great team. I'm still really close with most of them. But I think that was a big thing for me, was just being really intentional about finding time to do things outside of work. You work really long hours and it is tiring, but it makes a big difference to go get food or just go to someone's apartment and watch Netflix or something. It really made the adjustment to a new city a lot easier. Same thing in Buffalo. I have a few more friends here, but again, just being intentional about blocking time outside of work to like get out and do things with friends. So it's nice. I think a lot of the places that we serve are really like cool places to live. So I think seeing friends outside work and then being proactive about getting to know the city that you're going to be serving in.
Thank you. And at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about our favorite things in the city. So we're going to touch on each city at the end. And we're going to move into our training right now. So Isaacson asked, describe how essential those weeks of training are prior to your actual service in school.
I would definitely say they are super crucial. And I came in a little haughty into City Year because I had done some tutoring work and thought that, just because I had worked with kids before, that serving with City Year was a piece of cake. but I definitely found that it was challenging. I also within those challenges found myself recalling on a lot of the training that we had. One piece in particular that I just learned from one piece of professional development was that the student's behavior when you may feel like they're acting out is not personal. It's a sign of skills that haven't been developed or some sort of need that isn't being met um, in a certain area, and it has nothing to do with who you are as a person. And when you can understand that when you're interacting with a child and you're serving them to help push and develop them, um, it helps you a lot with your patience, and it just also helps to really develop a productive and efficient relationship with that child.
Can someone tell me what does training look like? Give us the overview of what your training was like.
I can take it again. It's 3 weeks. We call BTA, another acronym, also known as Basic Training Academy. And a good way to describe it is this helps you get acclimated to City Year's culture as an organization. You get used to working in a team, so there's going to be a lot of team building activities, just getting to know people because that's important. And while you may not be in a classroom with your team every day, just being able to run an after school program efficiently definitely depends on being able to trust the person to the left and to the right of you. And then also just specific trainings on what the intervention in the after school space is going to look like. Um, and then for myself, I remember as the training was coming to a close and I knew what grade I was going to be working with, my trainings got a little bit more specific. So like, what would it be like to work in a fifth grade math classroom, so on and so forth. Yeah, I think I hit everything. Oh, and then
Does
like
anyone,
compliance stuff, yeah, is in there also.
someone else want to share a little bit about training? How about Ashley? You want to share a little bit about training? Someone else? Anyone else want to talk a little bit about training? Either BTA, Basic Training Academy, which is the beginning, or your training throughout the year. All right, we're gonna move.
In the
Okay, go for it.
beginning,
There you go.
sorry. In the beginning, I think BTA was a little bit overwhelming because there was like so much information that was being given to us at one point, and we weren't even really sure like what the day-to-day role was supposed to look like yet. And so I think looking back on it now, like I would definitely suggest trying to pay attention even when you think you don't need to be, because that stuff that they're talking to you about is really going to be helpful in your day-to-day service. And throughout the year, we do something called LDDs, which is like leadership development days. And so even after you start working in schools, you'll have days where you regroup as an entire corps and you have sessions about how to kind of like perfect your interventions and kind of problem solve with a lot of the issues that you might be having. And that's a really nice opportunity to talk to other people at other schools who are working in the same grades, and then you get a chance to kind of see like what do they do with their students and what's working for them. And we use those days to like share the ideas and also continue our training, because I think that they're even going into a second year, I think there's still so much more that I can learn to be effective for my students.
So I'm going to put this one over to Allison because I know we talked about this before. How did training help you since you didn't have any experience working with youth prior to coming to City Year?
I think like someone touched on earlier, just about like giving like us a better understanding like where these kids are coming from, like when they're upset about something, and like how to get through to them, and like working with them on like more of the emotional side. And then also
with our instructional coaches that did a lot of the more classroom specific trainings. A lot of them, I think all of them, have had their own classroom environment before, and so listening to like what worked for them and like what didn't work for them, and like understanding, especially not being not coming, I never went to a public school, and not being a Boston public school student, I wasn't really sure like how the school system was set up here. So learning about that really helped me like better understand what type of classroom I was walking into, and like Common Core standards and that type of stuff. And then once I was in my school, the trainings that my team did, like with the specific school, about how the policies that they follow and how they do things, just like the little differences between classrooms and schools, has really helped me. And then also those learning and development days that we do with your whole core, where you dive deeper into like the data from your students, and working to develop and collaborate with like other school teams and other core members, has like been really beneficial for me and other members of my team, because we just take each other's ideas and like mold it into our own classroom.
Great, thank you. David asked in the chat, do we go over curriculum during training?
Not specific curriculum. I remember there was like maybe 1 or 2 days where we talked about like Boston public schools as like a giant whole and kind of like the history behind them, but we didn't dive into like what Common Core standards are for 4th grade, 5th grade. Like we didn't do that type of thing, because it's really too specific to get into in the first couple of weeks. That's something that you more kind of like hit the ground running without, like when you get into your school and like with your specific classroom and your partner teacher.
Thank you. So we're going to move into day-to-day service, and this will answer some of the questions that are also being asked in the chat as well. So who would like to share what a typical day looks like for them? Jay, would you like to share what your day-to-day looks like?
Yeah. So I guess I wake up around, it depends on my mood, because like I said, my bus comes right in every 5 minutes to my apartment, which is nice. Oh, and I saw in the chat someone had asked, it's called the Woodner Apartments. Very expensive, and it's not within City Year budget. However, in City Year, like a lot of DC, a lot of them live in Summit Hills in Silver Springs. Those are the name of the apartments if you are looking to it. But a lot of City Year like do that I know work on the side or do other things if they want to live in a different area or like something more expensive. Let's see. So yeah, I wake up around like 5:30ish, and then I do my commute, which is about 30-ish minutes, and then I get to work by 7:30 usually. And I always make sure I get to work a little bit earlier, because I want to plan, because we do have planning periods during our day. But I do notice that like once you get into the groove and you know your students, you know that sometimes like you may have to like alter things for certain students who are like falling behind, or sometimes it's a catch up game, sometimes it's a keep up, or like catch up, and other times it's keep up. So I spend a lot of time in the morning prepping. And then we do like a 4-hour like just blitz rotations and stations with different small groups. We do like scholastic short reads, and right now we're preparing for the end of the year testing, which is PARC. So we do like writing small groups. So for most of our sites or in our school, teachers running something in the front, whole group, and then Cityers in the back doing like a small group. We do push-ins. Other schools do pull-outs, and you pull out your kids and you work individually. We push in and we work every day for about 4 hours, and then we have recess duty, more planning time, and then aftercare with all the grades from pre-K through 5th grade, and then final circle, and we go home.
Would someone else like to share what their day looks like? How about Jake? You want to share what your day-to-day looks like?
Yeah. So I wake up around 5:30. I try to get to school before 7:30, because I, like Jay said, like to have some time to kind of prepare in the mornings. And my team is like, we're really, really big, so there's a lot of us. So during first circle, we kind of go around and we do announcements, and then we have to go outside and greet the students in the morning before school starts. So they line up in the schoolyard outside, and so we go outside and sometimes we power greet, which essentially is just like we have a bunch of different like songs that we'll sing to students to like greet them to school in the morning. It can be really fun. Or we'll just be talking to students and asking how they are, and then we go inside. And then a lot of us, we all kind of do our own thing. I work with fourth grade, and I have one partner teacher, so I go right to my homeroom class. And I do like tier one support or like push in, like Jay was saying, where I kind of hang out in the classroom and I support students that I work with specifically. And then I pull students out every day to read and write with this program that we started using. And so I do that for like 45 minutes. And then during lunch, I pull students out to just kind of talk and play games. And so I'm with the students during lunchtime. And then I'm back in the classroom. Also, we go out for recess with students, but their recess is really short, so it's only like 10 minutes. And then I'm back in the classroom for the rest of the day. I pull students out again. And then we have to go outside for dismissal and kind of make sure that students leave school because sometimes they stay on school grounds and things can get messy. So we have to make sure that they are going home, that everyone's okay. And then we go inside and we prepare for our after school program, which we have a bunch of different clubs. So depending on the day, like I'll be either doing prep or I'll be in the after school program working with students, or we have like art and music and different things like that. So.
Thank you. So you can see everyone's, both of the folks that just shared, their days are very different but very similar, and broken up into different parts. So Markella asked, what are day-to-day challenges you face as an AmeriCorps member? So Lisette or Mike, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah. Some of the challenges, I think it's just like one day could be a very good day, the next day will just, not be. And I think someone said earlier, like, don't take it personally at all. And that's something I've learned. Right? Because like some of the students say like, oh, like Miss Garcia, you're the best. And then the next second they're like, Miss Garcia, you're so rude to me. So like, I think it's learning how to be flexible because anything can change at any second. My partner teacher sometimes like has a plan. She has a plan for the week, and like she's like, this is what I would hope to get through in the week. And if like, so the challenge is like learning how to adapt and be flexible with what you have. And I think that's something that I've had to learn how to do. Another thing is just like learning how to navigate very difficult situations with like students, especially when like if two students are like going at it, or like if a student is just having a meltdown, and learning how to like what is the best thing for that student and for like the classroom as a whole. And sometimes it's like I've done like walk and talk, so like I remove the student from the situation. That way like my teacher can then deal with the whole classroom, right? And so like that's something that like I had to learn how to do, and I think that's something you kind of have to quickly decide on, because a lot of things are very like dependent on that. So that's something. Those are like the two challenges that I think that I've had to deal with.
So can someone share with me what your relationship is like with your students?
I can speak to that. I work with 7th and 8th grade students, so a lot of them are in a very kind of weird place in their life where they're not sure whether they want to be an adult or a young adult or a kid still. And I think my relationship with them kind of reflects that. I wear a lot of different hats for different kids. Almost all of them need something different from me. I will say though that they're all really kind people. They're fun and they rely on you, and I think this maybe speaks to a challenge too. I think they rely on you for things that they're not willing or able to ask for. And a big part of my relationship is trying to figure that out, what it is that they need from me. But by and large, I spend a lot of my day laughing. They're a really fun group. They're really receptive to people who are genuine with them. They can kind of tell whether you care or not. So I think a lot of my relationship has just been trying to let them get to know me as a person and the way I interact and how I express the fact that I do care.
So Tiona asked, what is your stress scale from 1 to 10? We're going to go with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. We'll go on an average. You can just jump in. We can popcorn this.
I'd say about an 8 for me, but I am also in every single like extracurricular that City Year has to offer. So like service reserves, camp City Year, core council, like every single one of theirs offer. I'm in all of those. So I go to the main office every single night after work. So I am like more stressed than the average City Year because I don't get home till 9:30 every night. But if I didn't do those things, I'd say maybe like a 6.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like I'm probably a solid 6 all the time, although it definitely depends on the day and my students, and there's a lot of factors that play into it, but I'd say a 6 is a good place to say all the time.
So Rebecca asked, kind of bouncing off this last question, how do you balance your work life and your social personal life? So how do we also make sure that we're taking that self-care seriously? Nathaniel, you want to jump on this one?
Yeah. Definitely. Because it honestly really is a big thing. Self-care is huge. It's really just like your mental health. So like whatever that is for you that you need to do to put you in a place of zen, make sure you're doing that every day and consistently, because if you're showing up lackluster, it's not only speaks ends up reflecting on you, but you're not showing up for the kids, right? And that's why we're all here and we're all learning about this, because I would infer that we all have some level of interest about serving people and putting people before ourselves. And part of putting someone before you is making sure that you're whole and you're complete. And that's what self-care is all about, is making sure that you're well inside so that you can show up and be your best selves to everybody else that's counting on you.
Does anyone else want to jump on that question?
I think a big thing for me is like sometimes I feel like there's just like not enough hours in the day to get everything done, and like just acknowledging that like that's fine. So last week I had like a million and one things to do. We had like 3 attendances, like it was just a stressful week. So like instead of taking my prep period and maybe like crossing some things off of my to-do list, I went to gym class with my 3rd graders and like played soccer with them, and like just like it was just like it was fun. It was like their 45-minute like PE special block. So just like ignoring all of the things that I should have been doing, like sometimes is therapeutic, and or like playing with recess at them with them, playing at recess with them, like just hanging out with them outside of like thinking about like we need to do this, this, and this in our lesson tomorrow. So just like ignoring all of that for like 45 minutes sometimes just like lets you reset and then like get back into it and just like go for the rest of the day.
That sounds like good advice and fun. So the next section we're going to jump to is living on a stipend, which is questions we get a lot about. So Allie asked, what is it like living on a stipend?
rough, to say the least. But I think you learn really, really quickly where your priorities lay. Like for me, I realized, oh, I didn't know how much food cost, I guess, until I got here. And not just like grocery store, because like I think almost every person on my team has gotten food stamps since coming here, which is a great thing for City Year to do. Most people in DC do it, or most sites, I guess. But just like Uber Eats in general eats up a lot of money, and we do that as a team a lot. So just realizing what you really want, and I realized I really want food, so I make a budget for myself at the beginning of every month. I'm like, this is how much I have to spend on Uber Eats and or Uber. Like some mornings I don't want to get on the metro, so I have set aside that money for me like beforehand. So like I've Ubered to work every day this week because I've been tired. But I set like that time, like that money aside. So I think realizing like really, really quickly where you want to spend your money so you don't end up struggling for like the last week before you get your other 2-week check.
Who else wants to take this one? Lisette, you want to share about living on a stipend?
Yeah, so I think New Hampshire has very low, like cost of living, I think is very low. So I think that was like another reason why I also decided to serve here, because like, I think, yeah, but yeah, so cost of living here is not that expensive, and like this is like the first time that like yeah I had to really learn how to budget, and I had to learn that quickly, because like especially like with relocating, like there's a whole bunch of things that you need to buy that are necessities, and like that first month was really rough because like I brought very little, like I only had like 2 suitcases and that was it, and like I guess I didn't realize how much buying in bulk of like all at once, like toiletries and all that stuff, like buying all of that at once was so expensive. And yeah, like within that first month, like I really had to figure it out. And like the next couple months were like a lot better. I think it was like after me figuring out how to settle in and there's no more chaos. Yeah, but I think as far as like rent, that's like not really a concern, because everything is, I'd say, pretty much affordable with your stipend. Of course, there are some core members that like do like to splurge and like to maybe live somewhere nicer, but like even then, it's still very affordable. Yeah, I think for New Hampshire, as far as like the stipend, you'll definitely be more than fine.
And the next question we have is from Lily, who said, how do you manage your budget? We go over to Mike for this one. Mike, you want to tell us how you manage your budget?
Sure thing. I've obviously had 2 pretty different budgets living in Boston and now Buffalo, where the cost of living is a lot lower. I know a lot of my friends use like fancy apps and things. I'm not that good at a computer, so I just kind of use pen and paper. Similar to most people, I like my rent is obviously stable every month. So that's my biggest expense, so I just kind of like take care of that. And then, yeah, beyond that, I just kind of, I have X amount of money left to do with whatever. I think a big thing I've done for my budget is you become a lot more aware of all the free things to do in your city. Buffalo actually has like a lot of like cool stuff going on. There's like nice public events and things. So taking advantage of that sort of thing, I think, is definitely helpful for your budgets. But beyond that, I think just whatever works for you in terms of like an app. I know people use spreadsheets. You can be like me and just like a legal pad, which is a little more precarious, I guess. But yeah, I think again, like you're surrounded by people in the same position as you, so there's a lot of, I think people have those discussions a lot, like how are you doing this and like how are you making it work, and wherever you go, there will be second year core folks, senior core. So asking them too, they're a good resource. They've done it for years, so they can really pointers in terms of what worked for them, and then like free things to do.
Does anyone have any tips or tricks on living on a stipend?
I like to take out half of my money, not half, I like to pay half of my rent every time I get paid, because I realize I am one of those people that am like really swipe happy, and I don't really think about how much I'm spending. So I either take it out in cash and just keep it and like put it away in my apartment somewhere, or just pay half my rent right away and then pay the other half when I get paid the next time. And that's really easy way to just know that's out of your head, and like whatever you have left is your pocket money, or however you want to budget it. But that's really helpful for me.
Anyone else? Any tips or tricks for living on a stipend? I think we had a few good ones. Definitely find what works for you, and rent. I think thinking ahead of rent is going to be your biggest expense, and making sure that that works within the stipend. So next we're going to move into post-service plans. So quickly just go around to our panels. Unfortunately, Ashley in Providence did need to leave because her ride was picking her up. So we're going to go around. If everyone can just share what your plans are for next year. Or your plans after service.
Yeah. Like I said, I think in the beginning, I'm actually returning to City Year next year to do a second year of service, which is I'm really excited about, mostly because I'm hoping to return to the school that I'm working at right now and continue to work with the students that I'm working with, mostly because they've been asking me about it, and that makes me feel excited. So definitely returning to City Year, and then after that, utilizing City Year's resources to continue working in the nonprofit world, because I think that there's a lot of other ways to like give back in the nonprofit world, and so I want to continue to do that through other organizations.
Go over to Allison.
For next year, I have applied to be a TL in Boston. I'm not entirely sure what I will be doing next year, but I did apply. But long term, I plan to go back to law school and eventually like be an attorney. And I want to use a legal degree, more so like in the nonprofit world, specifically like with urban education or like urban education reform. So what that looks like in 5, 10 years, I have absolutely no idea, but in some avenue that works in like education reform.
Jay?
I am going to be staying here in DC, going to GW, or George Washington University. Like I said earlier, double major in foreign policy and political science. I chose DC and GW just because I love government, and I love DC in particular. That's why I chose this site, because I knew I wanted to stay here and just get familiar with the area. Long term, I guess just working in government. Right now, I have with school through DC's here, I've gotten to work with like our mayor's office through like Serve DC and all of that. So that was really cool. There's just like a lot of opportunities here. So I want to continue to do more internships. And I'm interning at the Department of State this fall, which is really fun. So just staying here and doing more internships until I graduate in like 4 years. Yeah.
All right, folks. Can you all hear me? Okay. So I think Alyssa's, she's texting me. I think Alyssa's phone cut out. But I was responding to chats. So I will stop there. See, did everyone get to share their plans for next year? That's where we were at, correct? Okay.
Okay, we're back. I'm sorry.
You left. We were here.
Okay, good. I don't know what happened. Technology. I'm going to go back to Mike and use my legal pad. So our next virtual session will be on a legal pad. So Nathaniel, did you go?
Did not. After I served for 2 years in the South Bronx, and after that, I actually taught for 2 years in Brooklyn, and then now I am a recruitment manager sitting in New York. Future career goals are, like we was talking about earlier, just traveling, just being real artsy around the world, spreading love through music. And I actually do plan on starting my own education-based nonprofit that's centered around sports and the skills you gain from sports and how they're applicable in and outside the classroom, specifically with tennis.
And Mike, then Lisette.
I'm going to be getting my master's in secondary English education at Harvard, starting up in June. So I'm hoping to obviously teach for some amount of time. I don't know if I will do that forever, but that's my plan for at least the next few years.
And Lisette?
Yeah, so next year a lot of things are up in the air, but some things that I do have planned to apply for is to become an impact manager, and specifically here in New Hampshire. That was just an idea that popped up in my head a couple of weeks ago, and specifically because, like, as a Latina, like, and we do get a lot of like core members that are like people of color, and like there's not a lot of support or representation here in New Hampshire and in the site. So like that is one of the reasons why I am deciding to apply as an impact manager and hopefully make an impact in that way. And also I've been applying things back home in California, anything that pops up as far as like after school enrichment. And so like I'll still be working with like children, and also in things with like interpreting. I'm currently getting like certified to become an interpreter, so anything with that, because I still want to like work with people and still like serve in some way.
Thank you. So does someone want to just share to what extent, this is from Isabella, to what extent has City Year altered your career goals, or has it?
I can like touch on that. I've known that I wanted to go to law school for a really long time, but I thought that I wanted to go into law school to do like human rights, like constitutional law, because just like Jay, like I studied political science in college and like I love government and all that stuff. But when I started working in schools, specifically like an urban school, and I like started working with the class that I have, and I started listening to all of the things that they go through, like whether it's like getting to school or like the struggles that their family faces, like with housing or food or whatever, I like quickly changed my mind and made that shift to wanting to work in some sort of urban education reform, like policy legislation. So long term, like the big goal hasn't changed, but like this specificity of like what I want to do with the law degree, or like what I want to do, like the area of law that I want to study, has definitely changed.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move into our next section, which is cities. So we have right now 6 cities represented. So we're just going to quickly go around. We have about 10 minutes left on our call. So just quickly go around and tell us, what is your favorite thing about the city that you're serving in?
What's great about it is that
For our panelists. Sorry. Sorry, that was confusing. So we'll start with Allison, then Jake, then Jay.
My favorite Boston. It's still all very new because I've only been here since August, so I'm still like constantly finding new things to do. But I'm a huge history nerd, so I love all of the history in Boston, and it's just a very pretty city to like walk around in. It's like a lot of like brick and like the water's gorgeous, so that's definitely I think I don't know if I found like one specific thing that I like absolutely love about it yet. Just because it's all still very new to me, but I'm not from the East Coast, so just exploring like this area and this city specifically has been a lot of fun so far.
So Jake, then Jay, then Nathaniel.
So I am serving in Philadelphia, and I love Philly. There are so many really cool things to do in Philly. So it is. I think my favorite part so far is what Allison was saying. It's historical, and so there's a lot of like things to check out in regards to like the history that's here. But I also like it because there's so many different neighborhoods, and there's a really big like presence. There's a lot of like spaces, people who are in the community, that really that as well.
Just a reminder, if you are listening, please be sure to mute yourself. So we Jay, then Nathaniel, then Mike, then Lisette.
My favorite thing about DC is that there's literally always something to do on a weeknight, on the weekend. And just like seeing the monuments and all the time, like that never gets old, and just wandering around. It's just such a beautiful city, and it's also very diverse, and I've met like a lot of different people here. I grew up in a neighborhood, well, lots of neighborhoods where they're all like predominantly white, and so coming to City Year especially and meeting people from like so many different backgrounds and just DC in general, it was just like really cool, and I just love learning new things about cultures and city and everything every day.
Is it my turn?
Yep.
New York is the best city on the planet, bar none, most definitely. And especially now that I live in Brooklyn, never want to leave Brooklyn. Everything is in Brooklyn. Food, like life, museums, art. But there's also dope stuff in the city as well. There's definitely like a lot of free stuff to do, especially when it gets warm. There's the parks. There's like Brooklyn Museum. There's the Brooklyn Museum. I don't know. It's just New York. It makes you tough. It's the concrete jungle.
And then Mike and Lisette.
Yeah, I really love Buffalo. I think my favorite thing about it is it has a very kind of like strong sense of identity. People that are from here really have a lot of pride in the fact that they are from here, and it's a really nice community to be a part of. There's a lot of like little quirky things, like the General Mills factory is here, so it smelled like the whole city smelled like Lucky Charms during morning greeting this morning. So I was like definitely super hungry, but it was like it's like just there's a lot of stuff like that. It's like really unique to the city. So it's sounds a lot like Brooklyn though. We got a lot of cool art, museums, lots of free things to do. So and it's way cheaper. So it's a great place overall.
I think that's our new tagline for Buffalo. It smells like Lucky Charms. Lisette?
Yeah, I think it took me a while to really appreciate Manchester. I feel like, I mean, given that I'm from California, I feel like California has everything, and I am such like a West Coast person, and I had never endured like a harsh winter like I have here. But I think I've definitely learned how to appreciate Manchester. I think the fact that it's like it has a huge like immigrant and refugee population has made me feel really much at home when I'm so far away from home, and I've been able to connect with people and to be able to speak like Spanish a lot with them. So I think that is what really like is my favorite thing about Manchester, and like the different types of cultures and languages you hear all the time. Yeah, and so with that, like one of my favorite things here is like this restaurant, this Mexican restaurant here, and it's like the best Mexican food that you'll find probably in all of New Hampshire, and like they've become like my second family. And it's like one of those things where it's like I've had to find that for myself. Yeah, and just like the types of people that I've also met here in City Year, from all over the country, and like also from New Hampshire. Different types of people that I thought I would never be friends with, but I'm really good friends with. And yeah.
So for our closing, we have 3 questions. So we're going to go in the same order that we just went in. So Allison, Jake, Jay, Nathaniel, Mike, and Lisette. And the questions you have a choice. You can answer any one of these 3 in the last 4 minutes that we have. So the first was from Chloe. How does City Year fulfill your passion for educating the next generation? What is your favorite part of your service? Or what is the best advice you have for our applicants and incoming Corps members? So you each have about a minute. So you can answer all of them if you can do it in a minute. Allison, go ahead.
I think without a doubt, like the best, like my favorite part of my service is definitely like my students. Like they never fail to like absolutely just like amaze me and like make me laugh. They're 8 and 9, but like they're some of like the funniest and just like smartest people like you'll ever meet. And so they definitely like, even on like the hardest day of getting out of bed or like the worst weather or you name it, like it's easy just to like walk into the classroom and know that like for the next 8 hours or whatever, like it doesn't matter what's going on in my life because like I'm just there to like hang out with them and like make their day just like a little bit easier. So they definitely like make the long hours worth it.
I definitely agree that students are one of my favorite parts of City Year. The relationship that I have with my students is so great. And they surprise me every day with like notes. Sometimes they like draw me like pictures and hearts, and like they're in 4th grade, so but it's really cute. But also I think getting a chance to work with young people, and seeing how education has empowered them in ways that I don't think I was able to see firsthand before, really made me understand that education is so important. And like when you work with them on something, and then in class they raise their hand and they answer a question, and then they look at you right away because they know that like you're paying attention, and they smile because they got the question right. Like those are the moments where it's like, yep, that's why I'm here. And that's how these students are going to be set up for success.
For me, so I think for me it comes back to Ubuntu, which is like my community is tied to yours. It's like a thing we say in City Year, one of our core values. So that really pushes me through every day and reminds me of like the power of young people, which is another one we believe in. So just learning how like everything I do and other people do is all connected, and how we can affect each other. And then my biggest advice for everyone would be to get to know your team, because you're going to be spending 50 hours a week with them, and it's really important to have like good relationships with the people that you're serving with every day, because they will be your support systems when you need it, when you're having a long day. And also make sure you're making time for yourself, because you absolutely cannot take your work home with you. Just let it go, and then come back the next day with a clear mind as much as you can.
Favorite part of service was getting my jacket signed by the 8th grade students and teachers and staff after my team of the year. Also hearing back from one of my students that I was working with by like 6 weeks ago, and she let me know that she's been on the honor roll for the past 3 years in high school, which is super dope. Advice, I would definitely say come in humbly with an open mind. Be flexible, right? Because you're going to be working in a large organization and in public schools. And don't forget to have fun, right? It's a serious job. It's challenging. You have a team to support you, but enjoy what you do. And that'll make your time a lot more pleasurable if you look for the moments to really have fun and lead with love.
My advice would be to enter your year of service prepared and expecting to change. You will likely leave a different person than you came in as. That's as good or bad a thing as you make it. So I think that's my best advice.
I think the best part of service, like others have said, is like working with the children. And that, like, I can have bad days, but like I always remembering like what has happened with the kids and like the funny things that they do, or the things that they say, I will always take with me. And one thing that I will definitely take with me is like last year I worked with fifth graders, and there were four girls that were ELL and all Spanish speaking. And like I I know that they learned from me and from like the school year, but I know that I did the most learning working with them. And like those four girls I will never ever forget. And it was such a privilege to work with them. And yeah, working with all the students is a privilege, honestly.
I think that's a great way to end. We touched on how hard the hours are, how difficult some of the work is that we do and how challenging it is, but just how rewarding it really is. So I want to give a huge appreciation and shout out to all of our core members that are here with us after hours, and we heard from them that they need to be up early tomorrow. So we want to thank you first for not for taking your time out and sharing your stories with us. Everyone, we will be sending this the recording out tomorrow. So if you've logged on, you will get the email with that, as well as some of the helpful links that Dawn shared in the chat. So thank you to Dawn for answering all those questions in the chat. If your questions were not answered, we will follow up with as many people as possible. We're going to try and get to everyone, but if we don't, connect with your recruiter. So you should have, whoever you received this email and link from, connect with them and ask them those questions. All of you asked such wonderful questions. We want to make sure that they're all answered if we didn't get to them today. So the recording will be sent out tomorrow, and don't forget our next application is April 19th. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.